the very useful tools when you're doing agile project management is a burndown chart. It gives you a quick visual way of knowing that you're on track or not, and how to catch up if you need to. We provide a template. It is shown here. It's based on an Excel spreadsheet, and much of the hard work is already done, at least in terms of managing and moving and graphing. And you hopefully will find this useful. I'll scroll down a little bit and you'll see right now there is an empty graph waiting for data. As with most agile activities, the granularity is your sprint. So if you have several sprints, you'll have an opportunity to update your burndown chart at the beginning and potentially at the end of each sprint. What's shown here are the major aspects to your project. Right now they have generic names: aspect 1, aspect 2, aspect 3. You would change these to be, for example, coding, mechanics, control systems, building, final testing or testing. And under each of those is a sub-aspect, one or more sub-aspects, which if you add up the percentages, they equal the top level. You are encouraged to edit up here. Instead of calling it aspect 1, you might call it coding. So I'll do that right now. I'll call this coding. And what you'll see in a moment is that any editing you do of the sub-aspects, which are really the things that you drag into a given sprint, each one will go in a sprint, the names do reflect down below, and I'll show you the reason for this triplication of data. Let's call the first one user interface. Okay, so there I am, and notice that it reflected down below into these two groups. Now the top one is your master. This is where you would be changing percentages. Notice that coding is 35%, aspect 2 is 20, 15, and 20, and so on. And if you add going across, they must total 100%. You can only finish 100% of the project. And then within each major milestone or major aspect, you have a breakdown. This is your decomposition. So user interface in this example is worth or takes up 5% of the total effort. And similarly for 1.2, 1.3, again, you would rename these. You can eliminate ones or add rows as you need to, but they must, this number at the bottom must tally up to the total for that given top level aspect. So once you've created this is something you should be creating immediately. You get your master set up, and this is the rollout for the entire project. And I'm not just talking for this term, I'm talking about for the full academic year for the entire project. So you take your best guess at what these aspects are, you look forward, you think about what do I have to do to achieve these major aspects, and these are things, each of them, that can exist within your typical 1 to 2 week sprint. So once I've done that, they reflect down here, and you'll see that for example, let's take this user interface. It's worth 5% of the overall project. These, as shown in brown here, are the items that you plan to do. And then the ones that are in green are the ones that you have actually accomplished, and you'll see where they fit down below. Almost everything you do after editing up above, editing your master up above, is drag and drop. Do not do any typing down here. All the typing goes on up above. So here I am with my sprints, and you can see I have a sprint that starts on 1/25 of 2016, February 8th, and so on. And you'll have as many sprints as you have, because you'll just go across and you'll see that there are additional sprints down below. So however many sprints you have, and you can add or delete, change the dates as you like. So let's say that I plan on working on the user interface in sprint 1. So I will highlight both the name and the percentage. This is in the aspects to be done for predicted, and I will drag this, actually drag it down into place, into the first sprint. And you'll see that suddenly this shows up in the graph that I have 5% of the project to do during that first sprint, and I haven't done any of it yet. The actual is still unaffected. And then let's go up and let's do some actual. Let's say that I do in fact, now these are going to be gotten from the aspects to be done for actual. I will click and drag the same item down and I'll place it into the actually done. This is something you would do at the end of this sprint. So I actually achieved the user interface. So what you'll see is that the two lines are now in lockstep. You basically see one line because they are together. Now, let's say, for instance, that the user interface doesn't get finished during the first sprint. In fact, it gets moved out to the second sprint. You would expect that there would be now a disjointedness, and here it is. It's shown in the graph that I expected to finish 5%, which is that one item. Here, in fact, it got finished during the next sprint, which is February 8th instead of the 25th. So repeating this again and again, you would move things during the first, right, the beginning, not the beginning of a sprint, but the beginning of the entire project. You would make sure that all of the aspects to be done have a home in one of the sprints down below, and that as you complete things, as you complete one of the sub aspects, that then it shows up by dragging it into the actual columns of that given sprint. I will click over now to a spreadsheet. It's the same stuff, but it is more filled in, and you can see that now all of these aspects have been put into the predicted column. There's nothing left. There should be nothing left up here once you've done all of your initial planning. No actual aspects to be done should remain in this brown area up above. As you complete things, they get dragged into the applicable sprint. And what you'll see, because let's look at, for example, sub-aspect 3.1, I planned on doing in the first sprint, but it actually didn't get finished until the second sprint. Aspect 5.1 was planned, but 1.2 I didn't do here, so that one I don't get credit for. It's part of my burn down. Let's see if we can find 1.2 in the actual. And if I scroll over to the right, you'll see that 1.2 got finished in the third sprint. So this is how it works. You do all your predicted early on, you have your actuals, and you'll see how this affects the graph. Now here I am with a more typical looking burn down chart. Obviously at the start you have 100% to do, and the predicted value, it's not a straight line. It varies depending on the difficulty, but it is roughly a straight line from 100 to 0%. The thing that's really important here is that your brown line, the actual, is in this, for most of the project, above the predicted, which means you're behind schedule. You haven't done as much as you planned. Then it dives, because you were very busy in this one sprint, you managed to catch up and get ahead by a little bit, but then you slack off, and you see that at the end of the project there's a significant gap of almost 20% that you have not completed, and therefore I would call this a real problem for this project, that what you planned to achieve has not been achieved. That's the value of the burn down. I encourage you to take these, play around with them. Be cautious when editing the formulas that are behind things. You might break it. Hopefully this will become a useful tool for you during your project management.